Of course, we have to check in and recap the latest episode of the HBO original series, The Last of Us. In fact, it's the season finale, the season one finale of the series that we have been recapping and covering every single week. We have now reached the end of this story, and boy, it was something else to see this game come to life all together in fruition. They actually pulled it off. They adapted a video game from beginning to end in a way that we haven't really seen before out of other video game adaptations. And so now we have a complete picture of everything that we've seen out of the story. And we're going to dive into spoilers and talk about all the big moments of this episode. But before we do that, man, I just want to get your big picture thoughts about this week's season finale of The Last of Us. What did you think, and was it satisfying for you?
I really, really, really love the show, man. This episode in particular, I was very excited coming into it. But I have my doubts about the runtime allotted. I think it's 44 minutes to be exact. And I a lot of my reservations I had, I think came to fruition in this episode where I was afraid that it wasn't enough time to feel the way I think I was supposed to feel by the way that by the end of the season. And I still feel like they could have fixed some of the problems I have with this episode by adding 15 to 20 minutes. I really do. That being said, it's still a good episode. I am slightly upset that it's not great because I feel like they could have made it great. But it's fine, man. It doesn't fall completely flat for me. There are a couple of strokes of brilliance actually in this episode that I really enjoy. I'm kind of sad that it's already over. Really, we blinked. Like we sat here and potted about every episode. Now I'm hearing like
It felt like it
Last of
just
Us,
started.
is it really over? Are we really talking about this? But what a ride it's been. I still very much like this episode. I still very much love the work that Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey are doing here in this episode, man. I just really needed there's something about this episode that just feels like it's missing. It's something that feels like it's missing. And I was really looking forward to that not being the case, but it just happens to be the case, man. I won't add, I think, too much more than that, but still a good episode. I think, we'll talk about overarching how we feel about, the season in general, man. But it's a fine finale, just not the finale that I was hoping to get.
Coming into this week, there was a lot that had to be achieved, and certainly the pressure is on to deliver something with this story as it wraps up and leads us into season two whenever we do get that. There's just high expectations, especially considering that this is material that millions of people have seen before. And so as it relates to it being a near one-for-one translation of what we saw in the video game, I think in that respect, they knocked it out of the park. I think that you couldn't have done it any better in terms of absolutely staying completely faithful to the final act of this story, to the final pieces of this story, which is definitely something that has to be noted and respected. And I'm appreciative of, because you need that to a certain degree, because the game pretty much ended flawlessly that first game. Like it ends on an emotional gut punch, unlike many other video games have ever done. Yeah. That being said, I have to agree with you that though I can recognize that, and though that's the case, I do think that the dramatic heft and the weight of this felt a little absent for me, just because it felt like we got here maybe a little too quickly. And I think that some of those reservations and cautions that we've been talking about over the past couple of weeks have sort of alluded to that. The fact that the previous two episodes didn't really have Joel in it. Like, Joel was lying on his back for most part. We were really getting to know Ellie, which is important, especially as it relates to moving the story forward as we get to part two eventually when that comes. But I think that for everything that has to happen with the relationship between these two characters that we've been following week to week, there just have to be certain conversations and certain sequences and set pieces and things that just occur that make you really feel that emotional connection to everything that's unfolding, especially with just the events of this final episode. To a degree, I certainly still felt it, because the way that they employed other characters and how they utilized them to sort of be that sounding board for what we were seeing with Ellie and Joel, and to be that reflection of their relationship, was useful and it was good. But now in hindsight, I do wonder if this sort of this sort of, sort of character of the week structure that they had. I wonder how useful it was. There was no way around it because there's characters that you have to introduce just based off of their presence in the video game.
Mm-hmm.
But this show very much lived by a structure that every single week we're going to meet somebody new. And we're pretty much going to
Mm-hmm.
stick with that person just for that episode and then move on. And I just wonder, was that the best way to distribute out the story? Was there a better way to maybe even this out, make it feel a little bit more impactful by the end of it? That being said, though, I will have to just note that these are sort of nitpicks, and in the grand scheme of things, I think that this is a tremendous achievement, what they were able to pull off with the
Agreed.
show. It's unlike
Mm-hmm.
anything else we've ever seen from a video game adaptation. They kind of knocked it out of the park. And I mean, when you're talking about staying faithful to a story that so many people love, they mostly did it. There were some
They did
deviations
it.
that were important and key, but they mostly did what they
Mm-hmm.
had to do to stay true to what The Last of Us is. But with all of that said, if you've not seen the season finale of The Last of Us, go watch it. Go watch it right now. Literally stop this episode to watch it right now and come back and listen to the rest of our conversation because we're going to spoil everything, which means we obviously have to start off with the beginning, which is a flashback in which we haven't seen a flashback, I think, in a few weeks here. I think it's been a while since we've gotten a flashback to kick off an episode of The Last of Us. They were used in the first
Mm-hmm.
few episodes in a very effective way to establish the global threat of what the cordyceps and the infected were going to be for this world and for this society. But this flashback is notable because we get the introduction of a new character in this universe that was not seen in the video games called Anna. And Anna is the mother of Ellie. But in addition to that, Anna is being played in live action by Ashley Johnson, who noticeably played Ellie in the video game. She's, been Ellie for such a long time now, and it's so weird even at the top of this episode where you hear Ashley Johnson's voice. It's like, oh my god, I'm hearing Ellie literally as we're
It's
watching
crazy.
the TV series. It was a weird feeling, but to open up this episode, we see her sort of fleeing away from an infected person. She's trying to hide out in the house. She is very pregnant. She is about to deliver, like in mere moments. And this creature, this infected, breaks into the house and she has to defend herself and her baby from the infected. But she does end up getting bit in the process. And she also has to self-deliver this baby herself. Nobody is there to help her or to, make sure that it's a proper procedure. She has to do this on her own in this house alone. And we see the birth of Ellie literally unfold right before our very eyes. And we thus see the events unfold after that, where we find out that Marlene, who we haven't seen in quite a long time, I think probably since episode 2, Marlene and Anna had a very close relationship. They've been best friends almost their entire lives, but because Anna has been bitten, she tells Marlene, you need to take care of this baby. Her name is Ellie. Kill me immediately once I hand this baby over to you. Marlene is obviously very hesitant to do so. This is somebody she's known for her whole life, but she does proceed to ultimately kill Anna and put her, I think, essentially out of her misery so that she doesn't have to see her transform into an infected. But man, what did you think about just this emotional opening? The fact that they were able to cleverly deploy Ashley Johnson in this episode, literally to be the person to the character that she gave birth to in video games, and she's doing it in live action now. Just the parallels there. What did you think about her performance and just seeing this whole thing unfold?
It's low-key poetic, man. This is one of the it's probably top 5 scenes for me, I think, in this show, because I feel like I can talk about the scene for like a long time. It means so much, I think, to the show and where we've come from and where we are now and what they're trying to do by introducing this scene into the beginning of the finale of the episode. I think this was very, very, very well done. And just in terms of everything, man, I very much enjoy the opening of this episode, and the fact that it's Ashley Johnson, I can't even like explain how genius it is. They really killed it, man. Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin literally came in and was like, Ashley Johnson, you're going to give birth to yourself. And it's I know it sounds crazy. It's just so much more poetic than that, though. I think the ways in which they decided to convey this thing, man, because in the video game, this doesn't exist. You don't know why we don't know why Ellie is immune. This really is an origin story for Ellie's immunity in some form or fashion, but the way they do it just makes so much sense. And there's so many little tidbits, and I don't even know how long the scene was, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. There's so many little tidbits in this part that you could really just explain so much about it, man. The fact that Ashley Johnson comes in and, again, like you said, the episode begins, and even in the way she breathes, if you play the video game, you're like, Is that Ellie? You just like, you don't even really see her yet at first, right? It's like low key a little reveal that it's Ashley Johnson. But the way she's running, the way she's talking, you're like, that's Ashley Johnson. They done brought in this woman who plays Ellie in the video games for this scene, man. And you get to it, and there's so much tension. Shout out to like really cool pregnancy scenes in recent memory, because House of Dragon was killing it with the pregnancy scenes, and I have to add this to it. I think it was really dope. But imagine being chased by this infected and your water breaks. It also reminds me of A Quiet Place, right? Where it's like, out of all the times to give birth, this is the time where I'm getting chased. Like, are you serious? Like,
You
it's an
damn
anxiety.
baby. God damn it, stay inside.
It's an anxiety induced baby. Like, I almost felt if she wasn't being chased, she wouldn't have had the child, right? But then she gets into this room, fights this infected, and all of a sudden there's a baby there. Like, we don't hear her moan through the pregnancy. There's not a lot of time in between which her water breaks and the baby comes out. It's instant. Like, it's the fastest time I think I've ever seen a baby actually happen. But it's there's so many, again, different meanings in this situation. There's so many things and nuances about it that explains the rest of, again, the episode or things about the season. It was just so well done, man. The fact that Marlene comes in and has to kill her best friend while taking care of well, technically she didn't have to take care of Ellie. In fact, she kind of doesn't, right? Like, in fact, Marlene gives her the Fedra, even though it's small things like that, man. That's just really, there's a lot that could be talked about, and so I appreciated the scene. I love the way it was done. The stunt actress, whatever you want to call her, with the infected, 10 out of 10. I think she did a tremendous job. She looked crazy. I was scared for her, but I really did love this scene.
A super effective opening, especially at the end of a season, at the end of this particular portion of the story, to further provide additional context and motivation to the character of Ellie, who is so important and integral to everything that we're seeing. And the intensity in this scene was just at such a high level. And Ashley Johnson was amazing in this role. To see a mother doing whatever it took to protect her child in the heat of the moment, in the worst possible situation, is just an awe-inspiring thing to see. And you mentioned the fact that it felt poetic, not only because it is Ashley Johnson, who is obviously tied to Ellie for life, but also I think the fact that in this moment of just being in a undoubtedly dire situation, she's absolutely resistant to the idea of succumbing to the infected. Like, and that translates to who Ellie is as a person. Ellie is very resistant to a lot of things. She's a fighter. She doesn't give up. And I think we see that in her mother in these small moments, in the small amount of time that we get to spend with her, that she herself was a fighter and she was going to do whatever it took to survive in that moment, to give birth to Ellie, to make sure that she was going to be safe and protected. And so all of that stuff was just brilliantly done. And the fact that Neil Druckmann apparently was just like sitting on this idea. Like, he's been thinking about this for a long time, because Craig Mazin got this from him. He's like, wait, you want to do what? Why haven't we talked about this? It's a brilliant thing to employ in the series, because again, it just adds so much. And I think even more importantly, it adds a lot for the Marlene character, because in the video game, we don't get to really understand why Marlene feels so closely connected to Ellie. We don't really understand that by the end of this, when we see the transaction between her and Joel and how they're butting heads and they do not see eye to eye on the decision on the fate of Ellie, we don't really understand, well, why should Marlene care so much about this person? Like, yeah, we've been alluding to the fact that she knows her and she has some sort of relationship, but we don't really understand. Now with this, we see Marlene was literally there for her birth. Like, and her best friend, Ellie's mother, told her, hey, this is your responsibility now. Like, you need to take care of her. She might have faltered over the years, but that's something that's never left her. And so by the end of this episode, when we see her and Joel going back and forth, and she's like, you have no idea. I'm the only person that understands how difficult this decision is to effectively kill her to create a cure. That's crazy, just full circle stuff that you can't really manufacture. You have to ingrain that into the DNA of the character. So it was an excellent way to open this episode. I thought it was tremendous. To move on, though, we do come back to the present day. Joel and Ellie are in Salt Lake City, Utah. Joel has now fully recuperated. He is doing, it seems like it's okay now. And we get a very pivotal scene once we reconnect with Joel and Ellie that I've been waiting on. That's also a pivotal scene in the video game. And that's the meeting of this herd of giraffes. You know, they are walking through Salt Lake as a town, which is, you know, obviously abandoned, as many cities are in the society, but some wild giraffes are just kind of wandering around the area, and Ellie sees it and her eyes just become really, really wide. She's probably never seen a giraffe before. This is a first time experience for her. And it's a really tender moment between those two characters. I think another one of those moments that just shows the humanity and the connection, because right now they really aren't speaking to each other. Ellie just went through some really traumatic shit. Joel also just went through some really traumatic shit. So it feels like it's kind of hard for them to talk to each other. But this moment with the giraffes brings them together. And then after that, after they see the giraffes, we get Joel probably being the most vulnerable he's been up until this point. He essentially admits to Ellie that he tried to kill himself after the death of his daughter Sarah, and
Mhm.
ultimately he says I think a really poignant and effective line. Because Ellie says, time heals all wounds, right? And Joel's like, no, it wasn't time. Essentially telling her like, you were the person that healed my wounds. You now are essentially my new daughter that I'm sort of taking ownership of. Like you feel that void in my heart that I've been living with for 20 years. What did you think about just seeing them come together again for like this kind of final huge interaction between the two where they actually are on the same page? They're sharing a really strong emotional connection with each other. I think after everything that they've been through, just showing how far they've come on an emotional level with both of their characters.
Yeah, it's so interesting because this is one of the moments in the show where it's very clear in the finale that what's happened, the dynamic that we have now is very different from those opening episodes, man, where back then Ellie was the chatterbox, right? And Joel was like, I don't know. Now the opposite is happening. Joel's trying to, kind of talk to Ellie a little bit. He's trying to, trying to get in there. And because I think, at the end of the last episode, he has really accepted Ellie as his new daughter in that way, man. As soon as that baby girl hits, there's a new dynamic between those two characters. And so I really love that you could at least see that difference, man, that difference in character development and where they the journey in which they've come. I really love the herd of giraffes, man, because even in the video game, this is not a playable moment, right? This is just us watching Ellie and Joel kind of feed giraffes. But this is a reminder of one, The Last of Us isn't just some random zombie outbreak, right? This is a somewhat of a commentary of the world fixing itself, or the world taking back, some of the things that humans have done to it. We didn't really get to see that much of it in the TV show. I remember, I think it's episode 6 or 7. We see the monkeys, right? And we're like, okay, the monkeys are different though. They're like already kind of wild. Seeing giraffes run around, way more peaceful animals than apes are, monkeys run around and just eating leaves off of things. To me, that's the definition of like reclaiming your space, right? I even remember, this is kind of a little bit off topic, but in the MCU, in Endgame, remember there was like ports had opened up, the waters were clear because people weren't there to dirty them up anymore. This is another one of those moments to me that was like, giraffes are just running around while infected are running around. That's two completely different things that exist in the world. But Ellie and Joel are able to share this moment in a small ounce of beauty that does exist in their particular world together. This is the closest that Joel is going to get to taking his daughter to the zoo. You know what I'm saying? It's the closest that he's really going to get. And I talked about this before, but there's so much joy in Ellie. As much as she's a fighter, in which we talk about between her mother Anna, right, where she's like, you're a tough one. As much as she's a fighter, Ellie's a fighter. This is still the girl that tends to bring a lot of light into the world, as much as dark that we see in Ellie, which we definitely seen last episode, the darkness in Ellie. But when she sees that giraffe, she's like, come on, we gotta go. It's something about that, man. It's very small moments and glimpses of happiness and joy and the joys of the world that you get out of this that always makes that moment feel perfect to me. And so I really love that they recreated it 1-to-1.
Yeah, this had to happen too. I think that's one of those things where you get these two characters who have gone through the worst shit possible, and so now they finally have just a moment of peace and silence to come together and to relate to something. And I think it's just really key for them to have one final moment of joy before the very next scenes occur,
Hmm.
because that's what Joel is going to be remembering in his head once he awakes in the hospital and he finds out, like, oh wait, y'all are trying to have surgery on Ellie. His most recent memory is something very positive, and he also had to save her. So I think a lot of these things that have recently occurred, where she has gone above and beyond to overextend herself to make sure that he survived, and he's also done the same for her. They have this mutual relationship, this very protective relationship for each other, that is just, it's unbreakable almost. But we also find out that as strong as it is, and as endearing as it might be to see that they truly actively love each other, there is a flip side to love too. There is a dangerous, maybe a more dangerous side to love, to where you are willing to do some things that are questionable, to say the least. And we
Hmm.
see that manifest later in this episode. But I think that this final moment with those two and the herd of giraffes, in this open area, was just, it was key. Again, it was one of those things where you don't need to change it at all from the video game, because it was already so perfect. And it was just like one of those really tender moments, finally just showing us like one last ounce of innocence in Ellie. Because I think that after all of this, there is no more innocence. We kind of lose that completely after the events of this
Yeah.
episode, especially going into part two. So this is kind of the last time we get to see her just like being joyous and just being open and willing to just like have fun in this small moment. After that, they're attacked by some Firefly soldiers, and Joel wakes up in a hospital to Marlene, and Marlene reveals something just tragic to Joel, that they essentially are about to prepare Ellie for surgery, because they're going to have to take out samples for her brain, because the cordyceps, which is the reason for the infected, they can be applied to other people essentially to stop the infection from spreading, because we know that Ellie has been immune somehow. And so this cordyceps immunity has to be developed, but the only way that they can do it is to take it from her brain, effectively killing her. They have to essentially kill her in order to create a cure that can save all of humanity. Joel, I think obviously in this moment, is not for this. He does not want this at all. He loves her too much. The idea that he's gonna lose essentially another daughter, it's unbearable. We just got the moment of him revealing, like, I almost killed myself after my daughter died. Like, he probably would not survive this if he were to allow that to happen, or if they were to forcibly make it happen and have Ellie ultimately succumb to the surgery. But we get this back and forth between him and Marlene, again, these different ideologies. Marlene is willing to make the difficult choice because she does know Ellie and she has had a relationship with her for a long time, but she hasn't exactly lost a daughter. She's lost a best friend, absolutely, but she's not exactly in Joel's position, where Joel is looking at this person as somebody that he has to protect, somebody that he has to nurture and make sure is
Hmm.
safe in all respects. And so what we see happen after, again, all just one for one translations of what happened in the video game. Joel goes on an absolute violent rampage in the hospital. He kills countless amounts of Firefly soldiers. He just runs through the hospital, killing one after one after one. I mean, I don't know. He probably killed like 17, 18 soldiers in the
Yeah.
sequence. It's a really violent scene, ultimately to rescue Ellie. And he kills the one surgeon also operating on her. So he's willing to do whatever it takes to get her out of that hospital. What do you think about just this moment and how they unfolded it? Again, I think it's all stuff we played out exactly in the video game, but these two people, Marlene and Joel, who essentially have both been tasked with making sure that Ellie is safe. They now have to
Hmm.
figure out how to make a really, really tough decision. What did you think about that?
So I want to preface this by saying, the part of this episode that is missing for me is, in the game, there's one last stand where Ellie and Joel are fighting infected like through a tunnel with like a flamethrower. And I think that's one of the key components that is missing out of this episode. Is it's not just the giraffes, right? It's that one last moment between Ellie and Joel, I think, fighting together, that makes me feel like they got here slightly too fast. And that could have elevated, I think, this part of the episode in the show for sure, had they added that, because we actually haven't seen that many infected in a while. I was hoping for one more swarm, or I don't know, you know what I mean? One more group fight of infected before we got here, just to hammer it home a little bit. That being said, though, I really still do like the way they played out the hospital scene with Joel going around and killing the fireflies. I love that. I love the music. I love the camera work, actually, the way they were moving around the hospital. And I think this is we've seen Joel's, I think, sinister nature throughout the episode, especially last episode where he's killing David's people trying to look for Ellie. We've seen, but we've never seen it like this. We've never seen where there are literally people cowering in the corner, like, don't shoot me. Of course, those people he was interrogating said it too, but it's something about this in a hospital where people are legit giving up and being like, no, don't shoot me. He's like, nah, bro, you got to die. Like, it is like fire in his eyes, man. This is like a such a heartbreaking part in the TV show. And, this is, I have to talk about Joel and Marlene in comparison because they're so, for a while, they've had so many differences in the ways in which they protect Ellie. Something I wanted to note that Anna said, Ellie's mom, before she actually takes the baby, is she doesn't say you have to be the one to take care of Ellie. She actually says find somebody to take care of her, not insinuating that it has to be Marlene. And I think that's so interesting because after that moment, Marlene does somewhat become Ellie's mom, right? Like, this is the woman that at least looks after her in some capacity. Although Ellie's with Fedra, it's very interesting. The best way that Marlene, the best way that she could take care of Ellie was to literally put her in the enemy's camp. I think that's so interesting. That's like a whole another thing. But there's always been a connect between the two of Ellie and Marlene. Again, it's her makeshift mom, but there's a disconnect there because it's not like they spend a ton of time together. It's not like Marlene is popping up like, Auntie Marlene, here to see you. How's how's everything going here? And so I think it's so interesting between the ways in which Marlene protects Ellie so differently from the way Joel has to protect Ellie. And we've come to the crossroads when we get to the hospital. Marlene's moral compass is, I absolutely love Ellie. Her mom was my best friend. But her moral compass says, in this moment in time, my morality points to humanity. I must sacrifice my makeshift daughter, my niece, whatever you want to call her, in order to save humanity. Versus Joel, who this broken man who lost a daughter, who found another one, simply can't stand to lose another one. He can't do it. His brain can't take it. His heart couldn't take it. Like you said, right after we just talked about he tried to commit suicide of the first daughter, you best believe how many people I'm about to kill in order for this not to happen again. And you have to have like you said, it's almost the dark parts of love, right? You almost have to have something snap inside you to do what Joel did. And that's exactly what happens, man. He can't let her go. It's heartbreaking. He can't let this girl go who he now sees as a daughter. And for the betterment of the world. I think that's so interesting. He can't sacrifice this one girl who he didn't meet that long ago to save the world. And yeah, man, it's just a crazy moment, I think, in all of Last of Us lore. This is one of the wildest moments to me in the entire thing. Because it really is a question of what does humanity mean to you versus how much do the people in front of you mean to you, right? There's probably plenty of people in the world where it's funny, it's no spoilers, but we low-key came to the same crossroads and Knock at the Cabin. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like a similar, how much are you willing to sacrifice humanity to save the people in front of you? And I think that's such an interesting theme within The Last of Us, man. It's one of the more powerful things in conversation topics to be had.
And they've been prepping us for this moment the entire season. Every person that Joel and Ellie have come into contact with have, in essence, told Joel indirectly and directly, you have to do whatever it takes to protect this person. Marlene first charged him with that at the top of the series. We saw what happened, with episode 3 and just the relationship with Bill and Frank in that episode, and how that really impacted Joel to a significant degree. Henry and Sam, they didn't directly tell them like, yeah, protect each other, but just the way that they turned out, their fates is just a key reflection and a sign like, oh my God, we have to make sure that we stick side by side and do whatever it takes. And I think by the time we get to this moment, considering everything that Joel has been through, the fact that he almost lost his life, the fact that Ellie has lost people the few people that she's been close with, the fact that she's lost them, like they really only have each other. And so what was key about the post episode sort of recap of this
Mhm.
from the HBO recap is the fact that, I think it was Neil Druckmann who said that, this was the easiest decision that Joel ever made in his life. By this point in which he reached him, there is no
Mm.
consideration. There is nothing that has to be talked about. He's going to do whatever it takes to save her, which means murdering probably a dozen or more soldiers in the hospital, which is it's a really dark thing to witness because I like the fact that they didn't glorify this either. They didn't turn it into like this big action scene where you're like rooting for Joel. They took away
Mhm.
a lot of the music. It was mostly echoes and screams of people. You just see the blood, you see the carnage that he's inflicting on so many people, and the mercilessness. The fact that he had no mercy against all these people. You talked about people cowering and surrendering, and the fact that he had no qualms about disposing of them as well. And so it all just reflects back onto just the depths and how
Mhm.
far he's willing to go, which we've seen other instances of that, which were more, I think, just knee jerk reactions, like in the first episode where he just sort of snaps and kills that one Fedra soldier to protect her. That was just like a knee jerk reaction, something that was off of instinct that he's a protective father. But now
Yeah.
it's fully manifested into the idea like, no, this is essentially my daughter, not by blood, but by everything we've been through and just by how close we are and how connected we are. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And you got to find somebody else. Like, this isn't going to work. And so we see that goes even further because by the time we get to the garage, we think Joel and Ellie are going to escape. Joel is going to take Ellie, who's unconscious, and drive her away. Marlene finds him in the garage. There's one last chance for this to all be mended over. Marlene says, like, we're not too far ahead. We can still fix this. We can still do something about it. It's essentially a showdown between Marlene and Joel. She's trying to convince him, like, do what's right, do what needs to be done to allow Ellie to undergo this surgery and to contribute to something that can literally save humanity and can save us from this hell that they've been living with for 20 years. And Joel essentially has no reaction to it and kills Marlene. And then, ultimately drives away with Ellie. And we get it sort of presented to us in the same fashion as the video game. We cut away to actually Joel driving the car before we see the fate of Marlene happen. The way that they revealed that Joel kills Marlene is by him recounting what occurred by talking to Ellie about it once she regains consciousness. So we not only see him lying about it, we also see the truth actually unfolding before our very eyes. And so it's a very interesting way to illustrate just everything that went down. I just want to ask you, one, not only what did you think about just that final showdown and just the probably the toughest and worst decision that Joel has had to make, but two, did he do the right thing? Because I had to ask you because that's been the conversation since the video game. Did you think at the time when you played the game, did he do the right thing? And now seeing this series and having maybe a little bit more context behind certain things, maybe a new life has been injected to the story. Did the way that things played out in the series maybe change your mind about it? How do you feel about just the whole situation and how it went down?
Yeah, man. The way I really love the moment between Marlene and Joel, man, because it is legit the showdown we get of probably the two people who have cared about Ellie the most throughout her entire life. And it really comes down to which one of these two people have looked out, I think, for Ellie in terms of her life, right? In terms of the ways in which they go about things, the ways in which Marlene is a person who, as the leader of the Fireflies, probably wasn't the safest, right? For Ellie to be around. And in that same idea is probably one of the reasons she's like, go to Fedra. I can watch you from there. I have to watch you from afar. Where Joel wasn't tasked the same way that Marlene was tasked. She was cargo at the beginning of this, and now the heartstrings have been pulled. They have been through things that Marlene and Ellie have never gone through, for sure. And I think that creates a different kind of ending, for Marlene in the way that Joel kills her. Because it's like you said, that Craig Mason said is the easiest decision of his life at that point. Sorry, Marlene, you are no longer servicing Ellie's life. You have to die as well. Now, when it comes to did he do the right thing? I think that's the hardest question for anybody to ask. What I will say for sure is that he stole Ellie's decision, and I don't think that's the right thing. Ellie is and I think he knows that too. I think he very much knows that if Ellie was conscious of what it took to save the world, that Ellie would have bought in. Ellie has seen tragedy after tragedy. Ellie had to live through the death of Sam, in which she was hoping to save life with her blood. Ellie knows she's on a mission to save the world, and she seems like a girl that absolutely would have given her life to save him. But he doesn't give her that autonomy. And for that, I have to say for that decision in particular, he did not make the right choice. I will also say Marlene also didn't give her a choice. She just knocked her out. And for Ellie not to know anything that happened, for them not to say, okay, Ellie, are you ready for this? They also didn't give her a choice. And in some ways, Joel kind of counteracts that decision. And so it's a really weird moral compass thing going on here, but he didn't give her the choice. And I think for that reason, he didn't. There's no way he did technically the right thing. He may have not have done the right thing for humanity. He did the right thing for himself. And I think that's interesting given everything that we know about Joel as a character, the way he lost Sarah, the way he has killed people, the way Tess has told him take care of her, the way Bill and Frank left a letter that was like, you better not let nothing happen to this girl, the way he has been tasked to protect this girl. In some ways he did, but in a lot of ways he didn't either. So again, it's a very hard thing to say black and white, but I think if you look at it from he didn't give Ellie the choice to make her own decision, then I have to say he didn't make the right one.
Yeah, and I think the entire thing has to be approached with empathy because of everything Joel has experienced. But I've always firmly believed he didn't do the right thing. I have no people can't sway me otherwise because even beyond not giving her the choice, which that should have been what everybody led with, both Marlene and Joel. The reality is this man murdered a lot of people and did so in cold blood, and also murdered somebody that trusted him in Marlene. And he was doing it out of a way to survive and to basically hold Ellie as close to him as possible and to hold her near and dear. And so it was not only the agency that he essentially stole from Ellie, but it's also just the manner in which he did it to just mow down a bunch of soldiers, which are, they're there to do their job, and they probably don't all have the greatest moral compasses either. Like, sure, we could talk about that all day long, but man, you just have to know that this is going to stir up a lot of consequences for just the future of his character and for Ellie as well, because you can't do something like this that's such a dark thing to such a damning degree, and nobody's going to be affected by it and nothing's going to happen. There's hell to pay for everybody involved who's still walking, which is not many people after what Joel did, but it's a really dark thing. But the empathy piece is like, I have to still understand like where he's coming from. I have to still understand and acknowledge the fact that, he's been through some shit that most people shouldn't have to go through. And so from his vantage point, from his perspective, I mean, he's doing what any parent probably would do, and that's do whatever it takes to protect your child at any cost. If that means I got to take down some people, then I'm going to do that. And I can't sit here and morally be against that. I think that that's something that has to be acknowledged, and you have to reason with that and think about that and take that into consideration 1,000%. Absolutely. But it's one of those things where, the removal of her choice plus just the implications of what it could have meant for humanity. Like, come on, dude. Like there is a big decision to be made here that is not just about you. Like, yes, you are the central focal point of all of this, but there's something massive that could occur here, and that's the change of just society, and something that could cure everybody from the hell that everybody's been living with for 2+ decades at this point. So it's a tough thing. I think that people could fall on either side, and you can provide really, really good reasonable cases as to what it all might mean. But what's even more upsetting about it is the fact that he lies blatantly to Ellie's face by the end of this, which is the final scene of this episode. She walks away with Joel, and they've reached Wyoming. They're going to settle there. And she just asked him, tell me the truth. Tell me that everything you said about the Fireflies is true, and I will follow you to the ends of the earth, essentially. And he lies directly to her face, and that's the end of this season. That's the final point of this story. And so we'll have to pick up with season two whenever that does come back around. But just thinking about that, thinking about the fact that he had to lie and just, carry this lie with him. The fact that she kind of knows that he's lying, I think that that's easy to
Mm-hmm.
spot and tell, but she's just going to choose
Yeah.
to believe what he tells her. How are you feeling about just the way everything ended off and just wrapping up, this whole season and just how they executed the story, bringing this into live action? And the big question is, for you, is this the greatest video game adaptation that we've seen thus far in both TV and film? We now have a complete picture. What's your overall outlook on that?
So to round off the episode, it is one of the most perfect endings to a game that I've ever played for sure, because you know exactly what Joel has done. And as you just said, you understand everything that he has just done. But I think the important part is that you can't forgive him for it. And to me, that is one of the most complicated ideas and feelings that a video game has ever given me. A lot of times, video games are very definitive. I beat the last boss. I have won the world. I saved the princess. You know what I'm saying? There's always a little more black and white. But here, man, it's something different about the scene between Joel and Ellie, especially like you said, we don't feel that Ellie trusts Joel. We don't feel that in that moment that she's like, okay, I believe you. But I do feel like she says okay at the end of the episode. But while she may not believe him, I think she also understands him. And I think she also plays back the things that they've been through in her head. And in some ways, in this moment, kind of just accepts what Joel is saying to her. And again, I think that's good storytelling to me, in order to get to the point at which we've gotten. With that being said, this is absolutely the greatest video game adaptation we've ever gotten. Simple as that. We've talked about this in and out. Detective Pikachu, Sonic 1 and 2, Mortal Kombat movies. It's the best video game adaptation we've ever got. It's the moments in which it's 1-to-1, it's near perfect. A lot of the things they introduce to add more layers to the source material were very well done. Very good example is the addition of Ashley Johnson here, who's given birth to herself while having stakes in the character and things. Just think, it's little things like that they did in this show that really just elevated it, I think, to another level. And while I will say the beginning of the show held up a little bit more than the end of the show did, the first half of the season was like crazy compared to the second half of the season. I think for me, what could have made it even better is one of the things they do so well in the show is they take a lot of the human parts of The Last of Us and they harp on those. Something that it is missing in by these last couple episodes is the video game nature of it all. I think there's a little bit of video game missing in these last couple episodes. I kind of speak on this episode in particular, where there's like a big fight sequence in a tunnel with Ellie and Joel before this with a flamethrower. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people watching this show, a lot of us, of course, we want to see the human parts. That's what makes it great. What also makes it great is the infected. And I feel like we didn't get enough of that throughout the entire series. There was a couple early moments we got. I think it's episode 2, episode 3. We got a lot of that, but by the last couple of episodes, we didn't get enough of that. And so I was hoping to get a little bit more of that. But again, it's the best video game adaptation. HBO, Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, all Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey. Man, I as much as I nitpick, I almost couldn't have even asked for a better making of the video game in this way. Man, they did a tremendous job across the board, and I'm just proud, as somebody who has played the games, who Last of Us is one of my favorite games I've ever played. I'm very much looking to for future seasons of this TV show, because as both me and this is not where Last of Us ends. It gets low key even crazier. There's a lot to be done in this TV show, man. But man, very, very proud of what we have here. I think it's an amazing product of what video games can bring to the table when done correctly, when done with care, and with done with the creators that made it initially, right? A lot of these adaptations come out and they don't always work. And part of it is because the original creators are not even attached to it. Neil Druckmann is here. He's on the podcast, he's writing, he's part of the creative process. I love that for them, man. And I think it really showed throughout the TV show. So yes, I absolutely think this is the best video game adaptation, and I'm looking forward to future seasons of The Last of Us.
Yeah, it helps that it's an easy bar to clear too. You know, video game adaptations have
It
not
is an
been
easy bar.
great. It's a very easy bar to clear, but I think what's key and important is the fact that, in my opinion, The Last of Us is it's probably the best video game narrative ever that's been created. It's really astounding what they can achieve on an emotional level, complexity, you know, and all of those different things that you feel with the characters. And so to translate that to live action, in which you're mostly going to follow one to one, it's not easy to do that at all. It's actually quite difficult, probably even more difficult than the game itself in trying to establish that. But to have source material that is already 10 out of 10 cannot hurt you. You know, that's a great place to start. And so coming into here, we have talked about, you know, the fact that many video game adaptations haven't really adapted things. They are the same in name, but never the same in story. Cause like there's no real Sonic story. Not really. There's not really a Detective Pikachu story. Not really. You know, there've been a couple of cases. I feel like the Uncharted movie weirdly went into different directions that they didn't have to go. They could have just followed the game and they chose not to. But here, this is one of the only examples as it relates to video game adaptations where you are following the story. And so it's almost in its own lane at this point. And I hope we do get to see more of this. We know the God of War series will be coming in a few years. The pressure is on for them to deliver and to deliver in a big, big way, because this is beyond a quality level and just like what we adore and admire about the show. This has become a phenomenon for HBO. There is really no other show out there that's competing with The Last of Us in terms of viewership and the attention that it's getting. It's huge. You know, it's becoming like their new tentpole, their new flagship show that they're going to move forward with. And so it's reassuring to know that Craig Mazin, Neil Druckmann, they both confirm part 2 of the game will be split over multiple seasons. They won't confirm how many seasons. We'll have to wait and see, but it won't end with season 2. They're going to have to at least go to 3 seasons, potentially even more, depending on how ambitious that they get. But overall, this first season, man, I just got to give hand claps all around. For the most part, I thought it was amazing. The first 2 acts, which means the first 6 episodes, are the strongest. I think the last 3 episodes lost a little bit of the steam, but by and large, when I watch this as a product from beginning to end, when I go back and revisit this, whenever that will be, I think it's going to be an amazing watch, and it's going to bring back all those emotions and all those feelings that I have about this particular IP in general. And they deserve all the credit in the world for bringing this to life and doing it in such a faithful way, in such a loving way, with all the people that needed to be there to make sure that most people, I think, will walk away feeling satisfied with this whole experience. So, folks, those are our thoughts on the season finale and the entire season of The Last of Us. If you've checked out any of these recaps in these episodes, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.